every now and then I become obsessed with a song. And when I was in high school, and I was kind of shy, you know how it is. I don't know how you
Yeah.
were, but I'm like, high school sucks for most people, right?
Yeah.
And that I was obsessed with a song that I would listen to every morning before going to high school, because I thought it calmed me down.
Yeah.
And it was so rare. Nobody had heard of it. I felt like I came across this hidden gem that nobody knew. And long story short, it was Western Ford Gateway.
Oh,
Like, who
wow.
knows about that? I thought I like, and that's your guitar lick. And it took me, you
Yeah.
have to believe me, yesterday I thought, whoa, wait a minute, that's Caleb Quaye playing that lick at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just so that you know how a thing that you record in 1969 has
Wow.
repercussions
That's
throughout,
amazing.
not like throughout geographical areas, because I'm talking Romania here, but like
Sure.
through decades.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's profound.
And
That's
that's a great thing.
amazing.
If that isn't a reason for people to pursue their dream of making music, you never know. It was just a song we
Oh,
recorded. It wasn't even a
absolutely.
hit, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's got like 30,000 views on YouTube. It's not even
Goodness
that much.
me. It's amazing. That's God's gift. That's the gift of God in music. It's amazing. What's going on? My goodness. Well, crazy stuff's going on. When I say crazy, I mean crazy in I guess it's a good way, with this Elton John, Britney Spears thing.
That's what I was going. When I first sent you a message in May, that wasn't even a thing.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't even on my list of questions. But when I heard the song 2 weeks ago, and I read that's your original guitar playing from 1971, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that song, I heard it in the shopping mall here, and they never play Elton, let alone stuff from the 70s. So how does that feel to be like, this is huge, and this will get even like this will get even bigger. Did you even know they had an idea to do that with your with your tracks?
No, not at all. Not at all. So it completely came, out of the blue, out of left field, So yeah, great surprise. And for me, I think, next year my movie's coming out. So I think it's just, in some strange way, introduces me to a younger generation. And I'm excited about it. I'm thrilled.
So the record company, they never contact you. They can do anything they want with the tracks, with the original master.
Yeah, they own they own those tracks. I'm expecting to get some kind of royalty off of it, because it would come under what's called a sampling royalty that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So great, send me the check. That'll be fine.
But that's a great thing. So what do you think of these new remixes that Elton is doing? First with Dua Lipa, now with Britney Spears. I've heard some people don't really like them that much.
Yeah, I mean, I heard the Dua Lipa thing. It's not really my cup of tea. Nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't really speak to me. But I applaud him for, collaborating with some of the newer artists these days. I think that's good for him. I think it's a good thing. It's just some of the new music, I just don't get it. It's too electronica, if you like. So it doesn't really appeal to my musical sensibilities. I like to hear a real drummer, a real bass player.
Right, because when I listen to the stuff that you recorded with Elton, there's a great sense of joy in those recordings, especially Rock of the Westies. Now, not that the other albums aren't cool, but that has such an amazing energy. You can feel it through the speakers. And was that because you were all in one room recording with very little overdubs?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It was that, plus the fact that we had been we all knew each other. We played together. We'd done some gigs. So when we went into the studio, we were very tight. There was a tight musical chemistry. You know, it wasn't work. It was fun.
Yeah, and you know that I compare that energy to the Please Please Me from the Beatles, their debut album.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
They
yeah.
recorded that in like 12 hours with
Yeah.
very little overdubs, and you can feel that energy, you know. And I think that that may be a problem with music today, the fact that, you know, it can't have that energy when everybody's recording separate parts.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that may be one of the reasons why, you know, new music may not speak to you, and it doesn't even speak to me that much. I don't feel
Yeah.
that energy.
I think that's a lot to do with it. You know, the music that we grew up with, the music that we were influenced by. So obviously that's the music of the, you know, the 60s, and this, well, we were making 70s music, but as kids we were listening to music from the 50s and the 60s primarily. And so all of that music, whether it was, excuse me, let me just turn my phone off here, whether it was you know, early rock and roll, rockabilly stuff, or early what we called back then soul music, rhythm and blues, all of that stuff was done live in the studio. It was done all together. It was the, I guess you say, the essence of the analog world.
Right.
That makes sense. It was analog, which means we didn't have all this technology. We had nothing. You know, it was just a microphone. You mic the drums. You know, you catch what's going on in the room, and with vocals, they would sing live and sing like a guide vocal, and then maybe dub the lead vocal on afterwards. You know, or if you were a really good singer, you could catch the whole thing live. You know. So that's what we were doing, you know. We created the sounds as we were doing it in the studio.
Right, and you can feel that. But
yeah,
talking about, you mentioned soul music earlier, I think.
Yeah.
Music you listen to. How much were you into jazz music based on your dad's career and the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, I read in one of your interviews online that Dizzy Gillespie rocked you on his knee when you were a baby, and Ella Fitzgerald. That is something very few people can say.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I had a very, very strong influence in jazz, primarily from my father,
right,
who was a jazz musician himself. And so all these great musicians of that period, that generation, they would come over to our house and have jam sessions, because my father would work shows with them when they came to England, you know.
Right.
So my dad was good friends with Charlie Parker, Art Blakey. I mean, the giants of the jazz world, you know. Duke Ellington's orchestra, they'd come over to our house. So there was, as a little kid, you know, I'm like 4 years old, you know, I'm sitting there listening to this incredible music being played in our house. And it really struck me. It was like, this is what I want to do, you know. Back then, kids wanted to be like their fathers, you know. And so my dad was a musician, and he's making this incredible sounds with these guys. And I thought, yeah, I like this. This is what I want to do. So I just was listening to all that music. You know, that music was my wallpaper.
But at the time, you didn't turn out to be a jazz musician. You turned out to be a rock musician. I mean, how did that work? Why not the jazz thing?
Well, it's funny. I was playing some jazz, but jazz didn't make much money.
It still doesn't, right?
Yeah. So I earned my living. You know, playing rock music, and I became a studio player where you had to kind of play a bit of everything, which is what I wanted to do. I didn't want to just get stuck in one style, you know. It's funny, when I came up as a teenager, so I left school when I was 12. I started doing studio work when I was 16. And during that time, so this is like around 1965, So by that time, the Beatles had come on really strong, and music was changing. Rhythm was changing. Ringo had brought in the Ringo beat with the Beatles, you know, and so it changed. Yeah, I see him up there, and so he changed everything. But what I observed was a lot of the musicians from my dad's generation, the jazz players, who were doing sessions, they were stuck. They couldn't adapt.
They couldn't do the poof puff, that kind of.
Yeah, it was all cymbals and you know, a whole different thing. You know, they were still playing bebop and stuff, you know, and they couldn't adapt to the simplicity of rock and roll and soul music. Now, by the time I came along, it's, you know, 16 through 12, and those 4 years, 12 to 16, that music, those simple grooves, had really caught my attention. And so I already knew some jazz stuff, but I wanted to play not only jazz, but I wanted to play this simple groove stuff as well. This was exciting, you know. So I was listening to a lot of stuff that came out of Memphis. Booker T and the MGs, you know, was a huge influence on me. And a lot of the productions that came out of New Orleans via Alan Toussaint, you know. So so it was an interesting time period. I came at a time when things were changing, and you know, I was being booked on sessions where the producer would want the drums to sound like Ringo, and the guy that was playing the drums was an older guy, like one of my dad's friends, and he couldn't do it, and he lost his mind in the studio. So the producer asked me, "Can you get this another drummer? I'm going to fire this guy." And I'm 16 years old.
Well, at around that age, you were very you played a great part in signing Elton, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, you signed Elton John, you might as well fire people.
Yeah. So it was an amazing time. You know, it was a time in history when things were changing quite drastically, you know, and I was just happened to be right in the middle of it.
Well, and you're saying that it's very important for a musician to be able to play lots of styles. It's crucial. It's crucial.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you want to make a living and do session work wherever you are, play as many styles as you can.
Absolutely. And I think that also, it's not just about making a living, it's about a further extension of your own creativity.
Right.
If I'm just stuck in one style, then I can't apply myself to some other beautiful things that are going on. I'm stuck, you know. So that was something that really, really came to me. And I always at that age, I was driven by the thing that I wanted to not just be a musician, a player. I wanted to learn every aspect of the process of making music. So I wanted to learn about songwriting. You know, we used to have a saying back then in the studios, because you'd have the control room, and then you'd have the performance room, the actual studio where the musicians are playing. Then what separates them is a big glass thing, you know. And so we used to talk about, I want to know what's going on both sides of the glass. So in the performance room, where the arrangements are worked out, who's doing what, etc. But then on the other side, where the control room is, the production side of it, putting the sounds together, all of that. That's a whole other ballgame. And so I just set myself to be able to learn as much as I could about all of it, you know. And that was where I was very thankful that I got the opportunity to do that by working at Dick James Studios. And that took me.
Right. But you mentioned earlier that you left school at 12. Now, that tells me...
Yeah. Sorry, I left school at 14.
14, okay.
Yeah.
That was... that tells me about how different times were back then, because I don't think that would be a very good idea for a musician to do now. Right.
Yeah. It's not something I'm proud of, but that's just the way it was.
And you quit school, but you were in London. It was the swinging 60s, so the context was there. You know, it was
Absolutely, yeah.
the right time to quit school, if you ask me.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was.
But you now you got back to your jazz roots. Do you think with age you I don't know, you discovered more about the genre?
I think so. I mean, I never really left it. I was always listening to it, and even my playing in even Elton's things and rock things that I was doing, I was always a player that I would play and still do. I play rock music with jazz sensibilities. It's the
You know
best way I
who
can
does that
describe it.
as a drummer myself? You remind me of Ian Pace from Deep Purple because
Okay, yeah,
he plays rock music with jazz sensibilities because just
yeah,
like you, he grew up with that stuff. Because we
yeah,
forget that you were like the pioneers of rock, and you
yeah.
didn't listen to rock because there was no such thing. So you brought
Right,
in all the other
right,
influences.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's it. So yeah, and it's I like to keep things as musical as I can,
right.
regardless of what genre I'm playing in, and so that's the best way I can describe what I do, and it seems to work, and people seem to like it.
Going back to the 70s
Yeah,
with Elton, you toured a lot with Elton,
yeah.
and people forget, especially people who weren't even born then. I think Elton John was probably the biggest star in the world in 1975, I would say.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh, absolutely,
he
absolutely.
was the pop star, and
That's right.
you were there on stage with the pop
Yeah,
star
yeah,
playing Dodger Stadium, and that's probably
yeah,
his most famous gig ever.
yeah,
Now, how did that? Because now these days, a lot of people talk about the mental health of musicians, and that's a great thing, right?
yeah.
But back in those days, I'm not sure that people talked about that often. So,
Yeah.
how did the pressure of touring, the size of the crowds, did that affect your physical and mental health? We know how it affected Elton in some way, you know, with his
Yeah.
drug abuse and all that.
Sure.
How did that affect you?
Well, yeah, same thing. The drugs, that was all there. It was a pressure. Um, the actual moments when we were actually doing the show, when we were playing, that was like wonderful. That was the safety zone. That's when we're doing what we do, what we know how to do, and we're having a great time doing it. You know, it was the circus surrounding it that was the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's once you come off stage and all the press and the people screaming at you and all this kind of stuff. That's when it all goes crazy.
Was it as fabulous as people make it to be?
It, on one hand, it is. The concerts were amazing, and the crowd response from the concerts were just amazing. So that was really great. But then afterwards, it's like, those concerts, they're up here.
Yeah, and then you end up in a hotel room and you've got all
Yeah,
that energy, and what do you do with
right.
that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a very abnormal way to live life, you know.
Yeah, and Elton's been doing that like he doesn't stop. He keeps
Oh, I know,
going.
I know.
I
Yeah,
mean, his farewell tour, I thought, I mean, it's been going on for 5 years now, 4 years.
yeah,
He
yeah.
keeps doing it. But I think, wasn't it? I mean, I believe that it was hard, but I think it was easier because you didn't have the pressures of social media back then. So at least
Yeah, nowadays, yeah, it's a lot more intense nowadays. That's for sure. Yeah,
the circus surrounding a tour and an artist. Now these days with social media, I think it's a billion times worse.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Um, did Elton suggest, did because I'm interested in the songwriting process, did he ever come to you to hum like a guitar part, or were your guitar parts completely your responsibility?
It's amazing. The way it were, our guitar parts, me and Davey, was completely our responsibility.
Okay.
The great thing about working with Elton was when he came, he would either come into the studio with a song already written, or he would finish a song in the studio. You know, he'd have a pile of lyrics with him from Bernie, and he'd go through, and he's very gifted at being able to select a lyric and put a great melody to it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Once that was done, then you had a complete piece to work with. It's like everything was laid out. So the way we would do it, we would just stand around the piano and watch him play and listen, and he would sing the song. Now, I also play keyboards as well. So I have an understanding of how the piano works, you know, and I would always say to the bass player, watch his left hand.
Right.
You know, and so as he was playing, we would get idea, you know, I was very good at being able to translate his musical ideas to the band. That was like my job, you know, and it just worked, you know. And with Davey, you know, you play up here, I'll play down there, whatever, you know, we got it figured out pretty quickly. And I think we were able to do that because what he brought to the table in terms of a song was so solid. You know, there was no question about what's the verse, what's the chorus, what's the bridge, you know, things like that. It was very, very strong, solid musical constructs that he brought to the table, which makes it very easy for the guys in the band, you know, a drummer or a bass player to latch onto the musical ideas that he's presenting. And he trusted us. He trusted us.
You had great chemistry, especially the lineup of Rock of the Westies and Blue Moves. I mean, I know you weren't formally recognized as a band, but you're one of my favorite bands. I mean,
it was a great band.
Like Roger Pope and Kenny and you and Davey. And talking about analog, you know, you listen to it on vinyl, and the bass and the snare drum, it's like you feel it in your stomach, you know, it's like so tight. And it's a great song. I think Davey played on that one. I don't think he played on Boogie Pilgrim, but that is really that's a great song. And I mean, it's a shame the lineup sort of changed after that, but at least you made those records, which I think are awesome.
They're awesome. That was a great band. Thank you. They were great times.
I have to talk to you a bit about your should I call it a spiritual awakening? Is that too much to say?
Sure. Whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that's fine.
I was talking to one of my friends today, and I said I'm interviewing Caleb Quaye, played with Elton, and he did all that stuff in the 70s, and they were very excited. I said, and then he discovered God, and then, you know, he turned to church, and they were like, wow, that's like a 180%, you know, degree turn. So I'm interested in that. How did that happen? I mean, I know you said you just heard the voice. It's like a calling. Were you looking for meaning and you couldn't find it anywhere?
That as well. I mean, at the time, I was very despondent. I was playing with Hall & Oates at that time, and things were not going well. It was like, the best way I can describe it is like with Elton, you know, we got to the top of Mount Everest.
Yeah.
In terms of our dreams, what you hope for, and all this, you know, we achieved everything the world could throw at us. You know, all the fame, we got it all, you know. And after a while, it was like, I used to say to myself, there's got to be something else.
Wasn't it so you're saying it wasn't as lasting, the pleasure, you know, it wasn't as fulfilling as you thought it might be.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, and I've known musicians and people who have committed suicide and stuff over it, you know, and I thought, there's something wrong here. There's something, you know, there's only so many drugs you can do, and, you know, there's only so much, you can only get drunk so much, you know, and after a while, it's like, wait a minute, there's something is wrong here. And I was really getting, how can I say, just frustrated with having to deal with the circus of people on a daily basis. You know, that really was, you know, like managers and agents coming out to check up on the product. I was very aware that I'd become a product.
So you're fed up with the industry, is what you're.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It was like, this is not, something here is just not right, And I was never an atheist. I always knew God was out there somewhere. I just always thought he was too busy in his administration of the universe to be concerned with somebody like me.
That makes sense, I suppose, right?
I just thought, but I was never an atheist, but I was searching. I was a hippie guy from the 60s, I was looking for something, I'd done all the drugs and they couldn't help me find anything. And I always knew there was something out there that was bigger than what I understood. And I was looking for answers to this life, really, this thing called life. I need some answers here, because it just seemed people were just losing their minds left and right, I mean, even Elton himself, not many people know this, but the day before we did the Dodger Stadium concert, he tried to commit suicide.
Yeah, he overdosed, or he threw himself in a pool.
Or he tried, took a bunch of pills and threw himself in a pool. I mean, he was like lost it,
Yeah.
And we got to do Dodger Stadium the next day. Yeah, well, we did it, but I mean, they had to get the medics and pump him, and it was just like.
I think it was in the movie as well, a bit fictionalized, but that bit was in the movie.
Yeah. Right. It was a rough time.
And how did that your embracing of the Christian faith? How did that change your relationship with music?
Oh, well, it actually made it richer.
Yeah. I thought so.
It actually made it richer, no question about it. It answered all kinds of questions and just totally straightened me out, And it came through a friend of mine, Chester Thompson, who was the drummer with Genesis.
Right, yeah.
Weather Report, I'd met him out here in California, and he invited me to join his band. He had this little jazz group he was playing with on the side. I thought, yeah, and I knew Chester's work, and I thought, yeah, I'd love to play with this guy, And so we became friends. But what it was I noticed with this guy, because Chester and I are the same age. In fact, I'm like a month older than Chester. We're the same age. And I couldn't figure it out, because this guy, we're the same age. We're both professional musicians. We're in the industry, but he's different. There's something about this guy that is different. He's not doing drugs, and he's not going crazy like everybody else. He was like, and I used to say to him, I never told him, but I used to say to myself, him and his wife, they've got something. And it was like a peace and stability in their lives, the way they conducted themselves. And I thought to myself, this guy is different. Him and his wife are different. And whatever it is they got, I want it.
That's a great story.
It's true. And they told me they were Christians, they went to church, and I would say, oh yeah, that's great for you. I'll smoke my joint over here, fine, But I couldn't shake this thing, they didn't preach to me. They just loved me. And to cut a long story short, they, on Easter Day, 1982, they invited me to go to church. And it was during that church service that the Lord spoke to me, the same voice I heard in the hotel room back when I was with Hall & Oates. So this is like about 3 years later, speaks to me in the church and says, Caleb, it's time for you to come home to me today. I have a new life for you. Then the light bulb went off. Then I knew this is the same voice I heard in the hotel room. Now I'm in a church and everybody's singing and worshiping. This has to be Jesus. And it was.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So what you're saying basically is, as much as you're grateful for your days of fame, but you don't necessarily, you wouldn't want to go back to your to the music industry the way you did in the 70s.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, about Dodger Stadium. I think, do you think about that gig? I mean, you must have. I mean, I've seen photos, but you must have, your photographic memory of, like, I can't even imagine to be like on a stage and to have, I don't know how many people were there, 100,000 people.
100,000 people, yeah. It was amazing. It was just amazing. And sometimes the funny thing is, sometimes the crowd, when they would shout and cheer, they would be so loud. I'd be standing next to Kenny and Davey, and we couldn't hear ourselves speak.
You were like the Beatles.
Yeah, it was up there like that, And so I would shout at Kenny and say, "What song are we doing next?"
And that's a great thing, because history keeps there are some milestones in history. We got Beatles at Shea Stadium and maybe Live Aid and stuff, and Elton at Dodger Stadium
it was huge.
It's one of those gigs that people will talk about.
Yeah. It was the first gig. It was the first show at rock concert at Dodger Stadium since they closed it down in 1966 when the Beatles played there and they caused a riot. Right. So when they opened it up in 75 for us to play there, I mean, the whole town everybody just showed up. It was amazing.
Tell me more about your documentary, because I think a lot of people here in Romania would be interested in watching it. How can they? I think you can donate. You can still donate on the website, right? Yes, you can. Yeah. And right now, I don't have an actual date, but I can tell you they're planning on releasing it in January, and there's going to be a public announcement made from the distribution company next month in October. Great. You should maybe you could send me a press release or something.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Will it be available online? Like, is on a stream platform?
Yeah, it's going to be streamed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How tell me a bit about it. How did this idea come from?
Oh gosh. Well, it came from my book, which is being republished, and that'll be available on Amazon. And it took us, it's taken almost 12 years now to get this done, because nobody wanted to touch it. And if they did want to invest in it, they wanted to change the story. And I said, you cannot change the story. And I'm very pleased with the way it's come out. And I think it's just incredible that it's come out, or it's going to come out now as Elton's winding up his live show. So and I think it's going to bless a lot of people. I think it's going to be inspiring to some people to see how something happens out of serendipity. So I talk about how me and Elton met, and how I got him signed to the company and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's an inspiring story for creative people to just follow your dreams, but then it also switches over into me becoming a Christian, when you have to, you've achieved your dreams, but then you have to come face to face with truth when it comes to life. And that's where Jesus comes in.
That's a great story. I can't wait to see it. I saw the trailer. There's Davy Johnston there.
Right. Yeah.
That's because you have a very interesting life. I mean, I obviously cannot. You cannot tell me everything in 40 minutes or three hours. But long story short, I think this will be a very interesting interview, and I'd like to thank you again for.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Accepting to do this. Caleb, I'll keep you posted with the interview. I'll probably, translate it and put it up online maybe next week or something.
Okay, great. Great, and I'll keep you posted on developments with the movie and
sure.
The book and everything. If you want to send me, I can't remember what you had on the email, but just send me your contact info and
Sure. Thank you for doing this, and I hope you have a great day. And I'll keep you posted. We'll keep in touch.
Okay, you bet. Okay, my friend. Very good.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.